In solo leveling, knowing that Jinwoo had got him, Tarnac attempted to notify the Dragon King, but as he did, his eyes widened in shock as he could not reach him. Realizing something was off, Tarnac glanced at a nearby building and spotted Tusk casting a spell, tampering with the signals. This strategy couldn't have been thought up by the Shadow Soldiers or the Shadow Monarch, and it didn't correspond to the way the Shadow Army usually operated, which was to sentence the enemies directly in front of them to death. Gritting his teeth, Tarnac realized that this was the way of the humans, and screams in anger, remarking that Jinwoo did not qualify to be a monarch. At that moment, Baru stepped closer, demanding that he take back what he had just said, threatening him that it was a heavy sin to insult his king. This fueled his anger even more as he questioned how a mere soldier dared to stand in the way of a monarch. But Baru screeched back in defiance. Tarnac then used spiritual body manifestation, transforming into a steel-bodied golem before Baru. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Jinwoo finally stood face-to-face with the Dragon Monarch. As the two stepped closer, the Shadow Monarch and the Dragon Monarch locked eyes, their glares clashing in a tense and silent standoff. Antares wondered why he could no longer contact the Monarch of Iron Body, questioning whether Tarnac had betrayed him, or if this was part of Jinwoo's sorcery. Taking a deep breath, Antares resolved that whatever the reason, he must kill Jinwoo without fail. Gathering his power, he unleashed a devastating blast straight at Jinwoo, the attack consuming the entire area, and melts everything it touches, turning the ground itself into molten lava. Regaining his composure, Antares lifted his gaze toward the sky, his eyes narrowing as he noticed a massive shadow looming above. Jinwoo's voice echoed coldly as he muttered, "Arise." In an instant, hundreds of demonic creatures and shadow dragons surged forth, descending upon Antares like a tidal wave of darkness. Yet Antares remained unfazed. With chilling calmness, he simply raised his monstrous claws, ready to tear through the approaching horde. With pure focus, Liu Jigang blitzed through and sliced the giant's head as he remarked that things like giants aren't much of a problem as long as we're not fighting at sea. Feeling the pressure, he pondered that all the magic power over land is trembling, and there are probably tens of thousands of hunters confronting endless numbers of magic beasts everywhere, especially since he could feel his whole body getting pricked by that magic power at this distance. He questioned if they finally started over there as well. Meanwhile, as his dragon scales wrapped tightly around his hand, Antares charged his power and unleashed a devastating slash. In an instant, Jinwoo's horde of shadows was torn apart, their very existence burned to a crisp within the Dragon Monarch's flames. Standing majestically amidst the inferno, Antares' eyes burned with disappointment, asking if those are just good-for-nothing soldiers all Jinwoo has, mocking that Jinwoo sent his main force to the Monarch of Iron Body and tried to fight him with these mere troops. But as the flames settled, Antares glanced into the distance and saw an open gate, with Jinwoo dashing toward it, making him wonder if Jinwoo was trying to run away. Antares dashed forth, determined that he won't let Jinwoo go no matter what. Launching himself in, Antares entered Jinwoo's gate, only to be nonchalantly surprised as he was already surrounded by Jinwoo's whole shadow army. He questioned if Jinwoo had already absorbed the troops of the Monarch of Iron Body, then glanced over to see Bellion with his sword pierced into the ground beside the disintegrating monarch, while Baru stood atop him. Realizing that Jinwoo had defeated the Monarch of Iron Body's troops first and then came after him, Antares applauded, remarking that it was not a bad strategy. However, he said that the Shadow Monarch is being absurd, as from a distance Yogamont looked down while summoning a number of massive gates. Antares conveyed to Jinwoo that he might have thought he would be the only one chasing after him. But he was wrong. As countless dragons emerged from the gates, Antares explained that these were the gates the Monarch of Transfiguration, Yogamont, had prepared, and by using them, he could summon as many of his troops as possible. Antares declared that it looked like he had completely crushed Jinwoo's plans, and that this misjudgment would be the cause of his death, and proclaimed that it was Jinwoo's loss. Jinwoo only smirked at the Dragon Monarch before canceling his summons. This made Antares question why Jinwoo would cancel all of his forces, leading him to believe that perhaps Jinwoo had already given up after witnessing the overwhelming difference between them. As his dragons hovered above Jinwoo, Antares added that it was not strange for him to give up. However, Jinwoo simply closed his eyes, intriguing the Dragon Monarch. But when he reopened them, they resembled the eyes of a dragon, shocking Antares and making him curse Jinwoo at the sight. Stored within Kamish's runestone was the skill that was the worst enemy of the dragon race. A roar from the soul that incapacitated everyone and dropped them into despair, regardless of whether they were allies or foes. At that moment, Jinwoo cast Kamish's skill, Dragon Fear, amplifying its power and unleashing massive shockwaves throughout the battlefield, which quickly incapacitated Antares' dragons as well as Yogumunt. Witnessing the scene unfold, Antares was shocked, pondering that he could understand the dragons being unable to move, but realizing that Jinwoo had managed to render Yogumunt incapable as well left him in disbelief. Suddenly, Jinwoo teleported beside him, seizing his arm and ordering Antares to follow him. Antares wondered if everything had been orchestrated for this very moment, as he was slowly engulfed by Jinwoo's shadow. Meanwhile, on Jinwoo's deserted island, the two monarchs arrived through shadow exchange. Antares looked around in surprise, but Jinwoo explained that it was a place on the opposite side of the world from where Antares' army was. Unfazed, Antares told Jinwoo that while an all-out war would have been more advantageous if he truly had that many troops, it would have also drained his magic power much faster. He admitted that Jinwoo's plan to bring him there alone was an amazing strategy. Suddenly, Antares' attention was caught by a castle, prompting him to ask Jinwoo if it was his. When Jinwoo affirmed, Antares remarked that considering it belonged to the Shadow Monarch, it was not that impressive. But as Jinwoo summoned his dagger, he declared that even so, he thought the castle would be perfect to commemorate Antares' death. As his body slowly transformed, Antares remarked that this fight would be about whether he could last until his troops found him or not. Facing off, their auras clashed as Antares transformed into his true massive dragon form, while Jinwoo summoned his most loyal and strongest soldier of all. In a building in the USA, Norma Selner looked out the window and remarked that the flames of war were spreading all over U.S. territory. Sitting at his desk, David responded that all kinds of mana were running wild and spreading throughout the region. Clutching his head, David muttered that he never thought Hunter Sung was telling the truth and questioned what they were supposed to do now. But Norma Selner reminded him that Jinwoo was not the only hunter they had. Hunters from all over the world had thrown themselves into the battle, whether they were E ranks or S ranks. The abilities of an E rank were only slightly above those of a normal human. Surely they realized that, aside from the fact that they carried around magical weapons unlike soldiers, they wouldn't be able to contribute much to the battle. And it wasn't any different in the case of C ranks and D ranks. When E ranks hunted one beast, D ranks would only be able to hunt 3 of them, and C ranks would manage around 10. This was even the case for S ranks. Even though they might be capable of killing 1,000 beasts, they would eventually perish, becoming just another star among many. However, when those individual stars fell and drew shapes in the sky, although very faintly, they showed people the future, and people called this hope. Meanwhile, at the Korean Hunter Association, an agent reported to Chairman Jin-Chul that Hunter Sung seemed to have succeeded in luring the monarchs to a nearby uninhabited island in Japan. Looking out the glass window, Jin-Chul pondered, remembering Hunter Sung's words about an uninhabited island, tens of kilometers in size, where a gate of giants had once collapsed and released an enormous amount of mana throughout the region. If the battle were to take place there, the damage could be minimized. And Jin-Chul questioned if that was the reason Sung had been hiding in such a place all this time. An agent asked if they should dispatch a couple of hunters there just in case. But Jin-Chul responded that all the S-rank hunters were currently in the U.S., questioning what kind of hunters they could possibly send out. Jin-Chul smirked as he jokingly remarked that they could send out E-rank hunters. He then told the agent, recalling that even Hunter Sung used to be an E-rank hunter. Jin-Chul noted that he knew it was possible for an E-rank hunter to become a hero. Jinwoo rode Kaisel toward the Dragon Monarch, who was charging up his breath, preparing to retaliate. However, his snout was suddenly bound shut by a whip-like sword. Looking down, he saw Bellion forcefully reeling him in as a shadow giant reached forward, pinning his long neck to the ground. Wasting no time, Tusk cast a spell, sweeping his hands through the air as the force struck the Dragon Monarch, pressing him down even further. Beru and Greed then leapt into the sky and dashed forward, striking the monarch with full force at the same time. At that moment, Igris stood atop the monarch's head and drove his sword downward, sending a powerful shock that quickly electrocuted the Dragon Monarch. Meanwhile, as Jinwoo hovered above, he observed that their coordinated assault was working effectively, thinking to himself that it was working pretty well. Yet pinned to the ground, the Dragon Monarch smirked, finding it amusing, admitting that he likes fights where he crushed his enemies with overwhelming numbers, but remarked that he also found the opposite situation quite entertaining. Suddenly, Jinwoo's eyes widened in shock and alarm as Antares prepared to reveal the real thing. At that moment, the Dragon Monarch unleashed a deafening scream, activating the same dragon fear that Jinwoo had recently used. Instantly, Jinwoo's shadows were incapacitated on sight. Feeling the immense force crash down on him, Jinwoo realized in horror that it was a dragon fear attack from the King of Dragons himself. The overwhelming pressure made it impossible for him to control his shadow soldiers, forcing him to quickly cancel his summons. Charging up a devastating blast, Antares released a fire attack powerful enough to incinerate anything in its path. Jinwoo swiftly summoned Kaisel back to the abyss as the blast roared past them, tearing through the mountain range with violent force before erupting into the sea in a massive explosion. Standing tall before the shattered mountain, Antares declared with cold certainty that this was the real thing. The Dragon Monarch's voice thundered across the battlefield, proclaiming himself as the avatar of destruction, who doesn't hesitate to sacrifice oneself for the sake of a raging war, the amalgam of blood, screams, madness, and destruction, a being created solely for the purpose of war. That is me, Antares, the King of Dragons and the Monarch of Destruction. As the Dragon Monarch towered over him, Jinwoo pondered that the enormous amount of mana released when the King of Giants died must have sunk into the ground, and yet it still hadn't lasted against Antares' attack. Even undying soldiers would perish instantly if they were to take a direct hit from Antares' breath. Transforming back into his humanoid form, Antares told the Shadow Monarch not to be so nervous. He explained that when Jinwoo grabbed his arm, he could have easily broken free, but he did not, because Jinwoo had impressed him by driving him into a corner. As a fellow monarch, Antares remarked that he wished to have a quiet conversation with him. He noted that if Jinwoo had inherited the previous Shadow Monarch's memories, then he must already know that their ultimate enemy was not of this world, but one that existed beyond the skies, the army of the rulers. Their only meaning in existence is to destroy the monarchs who were born within darkness, and the Shadow Monarch is not an exception to this. Antares reflected that he had been planning to eliminate Jinwoo and prepare for war against them, but after witnessing the way Jinwoo fought, he had changed his mind. He noted that Jinwoo possessed a very different set of talents compared to Ashbourne, and within those talents, he could see their glorious victory. He declared that if Jinwoo wanted him to let his family live, he would do so. If Jinwoo wanted him to preserve his country, he would do so as well. If Jinwoo wished for him and his soldiers to depart from this land, he would leave quietly. However, Antares urged him to become the true owner of the land, not just the castle in the hills, but the master of the entire planet itself, stating that Jinwoo possessed such qualifications. Antares then extended his hand toward Jinwoo, who only glanced at it before shifting his gaze back to the Dragon Monarch. Antares told him that all he had to do was take his hand, explaining that if they were to combine forces to defeat the soldiers of the rulers, then Jinwoo's family, his country, and the entire planet would once again regain peace and freedom. Antares asked for his answer, questioning whether Jinwoo would truly join him. But Jinwoo only smirked and told Antares not to make him laugh, questioning if he really expected him to believe such words when his very eyes were burning with the desire to kill him. Hearing Jinwoo's response, Antares burst into laughter as Jinwoo slowly prepared himself. With malice heavy in his voice, Antares admitted he could no longer hide it, that this had been his final mercy to Jinwoo. Then with a menacing glare, he declared for the Shadow Monarch to prepare. Overwhelming with malice, Antares slowly began his transformation. Forming his massive hands first, he reached toward Jinwoo, who narrowly dodged and called out Kaisel as the sheer weight of Antares' power crushed the ground beneath them. Antares' gaze followed Jinwoo's movements as he completed his transformation, turning toward Jinwoo's position and unleashing a massive fire blast in his direction. Jinwoo managed to dodge the attack, immediately ordering Kaisel to dive down toward Antares, who continued to breathe torrents of fire. Leaping from Kaisel's back, Jinwoo dashed forward, channeling his aura as he spun forcefully through the air before slicing against the monarch's thick scales. Landing back onto Kaisel, Jinwoo glanced over his shoulder, wondering if his strike had not left a single scratch. But Antares only mocked him with pride, telling Jinwoo that he could never hurt him with an attack like that. Jinwoo then commanded Kaisel to get out of there, but the Dragon Monarch released a deafening roar, Dragon Fear, which rendered Kaisel unable to move. Alarmed by the situation, Kaisel quickly wrapped Jinwoo in his tail and swung him away from danger before the Dragon Monarch launched a fire blast. Antares' powerful attack shook the ground as it reached the shore, vaporizing everything in its path. Standing firm, Antares remarked that Jinwoo probably wouldn't die from something like that. From within the rising steam, Jinwoo leapt onto Antares' chest, gripping tightly as his foot pressed down. He remarked that the surface felt like magma, as the searing heat burned beneath him. With insane speed, Jinwoo consecutively stabbed the monarch, making him reach out for Jinwoo, pressing his claw against his chest to crush him. However, Jinwoo managed to dodge and muttered, "Arise." Catching the Dragon Monarch's attention, 3 shadows of equal size emerged. One quickly lunged forward and clamped onto his neck, while the others inhaled deeply before releasing a blast of fire against him. As Jinwoo watched his shadow dragon unleash its flames upon the Dragon Monarch, he wondered if the fires of the ancient dragons that Belian once led were ineffective against Antares. Sweat dripped down his face as he realized that Antares possessed unimaginably greater power and defense than anyone he had ever fought before. And he noted that he couldn't rely on his usual way of fighting against the King of Dragons. This made Jinwoo think to himself that he needed a stronger power, a power that could defeat an armored mountain with only his bare hands. A sudden realization struck him. His focus sharpened on armor, driving him to channel his power while Antares had already finished obliterating the shadow dragons. Antares questioned whether Jinwoo was truly trying to defeat him with that lowly shadow, but his eyes suddenly widened in shock as he saw a massive black aura engulfing the sky. Realization struck him. The power of darkness was flowing toward Jinwoo, forcing him to question what the Shadow Monarch was scheming. As the dark aura slowly wrapped around him, Jinwoo intended to forge it into armor, to make a bigger and sturdier dark armor, one so immense that every living thing in the world could see it. At that moment, a massive storm of darkness swirled around Jinwoo, making the Dragon Monarch appear small beside it. Looking at the colossal aura, Antares pondered if it was astralization, but he quickly dismissed the thought, reasoning that the Shadow Monarch had originally been a fragment of light, and thus should not have any other forms. That should have been his original form. He questioned, how can his form be so enormous? It can't be, the Dragon Monarch remarked, questioning whether Jinwoo had truly summoned the power of death onto Earth. Still in disbelief, he wondered how Jinwoo had achieved this, noting that he had been just a human until recently, and asked himself, how is Jinwoo able to control the power of death to this extent? Looking at his massive shadowed hands, Jinwoo questioned within himself if what he was seeing was truly him. It was the true strength that the Shadow Monarch Ashborn had left for him. From within his body, from the inside of that enormous form, an incredible and unimaginable amount of power flowed endlessly through him. As Antares observed Jinwoo's massive astralized form, he realized that Jinwoo was someone who had spent much of his life existing between the realms of the living and the dead. As he readied a fire blast, Antares understood why the Shadow Monarch, Ashborn, had been able to pass on such power to a mere human. This human had been fighting a battle against himself all along, even before he received this power. For the sake of the living, Antares resolved to eliminate Jinwoo, knowing that he had become far too dangerous, and unleashed his blast toward him. Jinwoo, who quickly summoned a massive sword and forcefully swung it, sending a mana slash against the dragon's breath. The strike sliced through the flames and struck the monarch, releasing a surge of electricity upon impact. The two locked eyes, grim with determination, as they prepared to face off once more. Suddenly, Antares and Jinwoo dashed forward, their immense speed shaking the very air itself. The moment they collided, their auras clashed violently, battling for dominance in a storm of raw power. Towering over him, the Dragon Monarch struck first with a massive claw, but Jinwoo caught the blow and countered with a heavy punch to the monarch's jaw. Unfazed, Antares quickly recovered, opening his jaws wide before clamping down on Jinwoo's torso. With brute force, he lifted Jinwoo high into the air and hurled him down, crashing him violently into the ground. As Jinwoo lay on the ground, his attention was suddenly caught by an incoming force. Reacting instantly, he shifted just in time as a blast from the Dragon Monarch tore past, grazing his arm, barely dodging the Monarch's deadly laser blast. Now, with only one arm, the Shadow Monarch summoned a massive sword and charged toward Antares, who quickly unleashed another blazing fire blast in retaliation. Jinwoo swung his blade through the Dragon Monarch's blazing breath, forcing his way forward before slashing across the Monarch's chest. Wagging his massive tail, the Dragon Monarch retaliated, whipping it toward Jinwoo and sending him flying across the battlefield. As Jinwoo crashed hard into the ground, Antares soared into the sky, summoning countless fiery orbs that rained down upon him like a relentless storm. Suddenly, Antares' eyes widened in shock as a massive sword emerged from the thick cloud of dust, slicing through the falling flames before tearing straight into his wings. 6 more massive swords were summoned by the Shadow Monarch and hurled forth toward the Dragon Monarch, who countered with another devastating fire blast. Their attacks collided fiercely, consuming the entire island in the chaos of their overwhelming power. As the dust slowly settled, Jinwoo was revealed, beaten and worn, his Susanoo shattering into pieces. Jinwoo fell to the ground, weakened, as the silhouette of the Dragon Monarch slowly emerged from the lingering cloud of dust. Taking a deep breath, Jinwoo remarked that his Susanoo takes an enormous amount of stamina just to maintain a great power. Antares, towering over Jinwoo, declared that this was his final offer, demanding to know if Jinwoo truly had no intention of joining him. Slowly equipping his shadow armor, Jinwoo calmly remarked that he had no intention of cooperating with a monster. The Dragon Monarch called him foolish as a massive blade formed from his hand. Facing one another, the two launched forward once more, their blades clashing and shaking the very air of the battlefield. As they exchanged blows, Antares taunted Jinwoo, telling him that the Monarch of Transfiguration and the Army of Destruction is destroying everything, and in the end, he won't be able to protect even at this moment, while they are crossing swords. And even if Jinwoo are the king of the dead, as a human, he must fear death, Antares continued, questioning if Jinwoo does wish for the flame that even incinerates death itself, to turn him into ashes. Smiling menacingly, Antares declared that soon everything Jinwoo was trying so desperately to protect would become nothing more than an illusion. As Antares deflected Jinwoo's dagger, he noted that Jinwoo surely must sense it since he have awakened the powers of Ashborn. The countless cries of suffering in this land and world. This is what a war is. This is the sound of the army of destruction ravaging humanity. As Jinwoo struggled, the Dragon Monarch's voice thundered, commanding him to listen to their cries of suffering. "Let their despair become contagious and silence everyone," Antares said, pointing his sword toward Jinwoo and telling him to regret his decision. But Jinwoo responded that he should be the one saying that, while his dagger silently hovered behind the Dragon Monarch and rushed forward toward Antares' back, only for the blade to stop mid-air, halted by Antares' force field. This made Antares smirk as he questioned Jinwoo, mocking if he truly thought a dagger forged from a dragon's tooth could harm the king of dragons. Jinwoo sprang back, putting distance between himself and Antares, who questioned if he didn't find it amusing, a fight between a flame born within darkness and a darkness born within light. However, it seemed that this fight was nearing its end, Antares remarked, an assessment Jinwoo silently agreed with. Jinwoo declared that he could now see the end, making Antares question if he had decided that resistance was futile. But, without hesitation, Jinwoo dashed forth toward him, prompting the Dragon Monarch to ready his sword with excitement, roaring that the army of destruction didn't even need to find this place, since he would raise their morale by beheading the foolish Shadow Monarch. In front of the Dragon Monarch, Jinwoo remarked that the sun darkens the shadows. Antares' expression twisted in disbelief as Jinwoo's most trusted shadows appeared, restraining him in place. Enraged, the monarch screamed, vowing to rip Jinwoo to pieces and turn him into food for his drakes, proclaiming that he would grant Jinwoo a miserable death for daring to resist the King of Dragons until the very last moment. At that moment, Jinwoo slowly summoned his father's dagger. As the weapon formed in his grasp, his figure began to shift, faintly resembling his father, Ashbourne, and even a younger version of himself. With all his strength, he delivered a final strike to the Dragon Monarch, the blade cutting down vertically and splitting through the monarch. Wondering if Antares could see his own death, Jinwoo clenched his father's dagger tightly as memories of his beloved father flowed through his mind. At that moment, the sky slowly cracked and shattered as Jinwoo's attack cleaved through Antares. Face sliced in half, Antares said he didn't expect that one, but it shouldn't have been possible. Since he was certain that he didn't see a gate when he first arrived here, he noted that an enormous amount of energy would have been required to connect the two worlds and questioned how the ruler's army was here. He asked Jinwoo if he was aiming for this the entire time, to distort space with the clash of great powers, bringing his allies from the other world here. He realized that the reason Jinwoo distracted the army and the reason he brought him here was because he wanted an undisturbed fight. But Antares reasoned to himself that there was no way Jinwoo could have communicated with the rulers. Jinwoo responded that there was a way, which was the vessel of the rulers. The vessels that they lent powers to were still here. Antares realized that Jinwoo used the vessels to prepare a gate to this place. He remarked that Jinwoo had found a way to win the war, even if he were to lose the battle, and admitted it was his complete loss for only looking at the smaller battle. Jinwoo asked if it was him, the one who commanded the Monarch of White Flames and the Beast Monarch to attack the Shadow Monarch. Antares glanced at Jinwoo, asking if the Monarch of White Flames told him this. Recalling his memory of the Monarch of White Flames, Jinwoo muttered Ashbourne, making Antares' eyes widen in surprise as Jinwoo raised his middle finger and continued that Ashbourne wanted him to send Antares his regards. Angered, Antares charged at Jinwoo, only for his movement to halt as he was already impaled by the ruler's spears. Glancing above, Antares saw the brightest fragment of luminosity hovering above him. He remarked that the world was covered by such bright light and such dark shadow, and admitted that he didn't have any chance of winning from the start. As his body crumbled into dust, he declared that he would wait within the true eternal rest, not the illusionary eternal rest that the Shadow Monarch had created. But Jinwoo assured him not to worry, since he would see him again soon enough as his body fully crumbled away. As the brightest fragment of luminosity descended, he noted that Jinwoo had ended their war and admitted that he didn't know how he could ever show his appreciation. However, Jinwoo responded that he didn't know if this could be called showing appreciation, but he did have a request. He told the fragment of brilliant luminosity that it was something only he could do for him. Proudly, the fragment assured Jinwoo that he would do everything within his power to aid him. Jinwoo then remarked, just once more, could he use the cup of reincarnation just once more? The rulers fell silent for a moment before the fragment of brilliant luminosity clarified if Jinwoo was asking to use the cup of reincarnation to turn back time, and Jinwoo affirmed this. The fragment of brilliant luminosity then explained that even if Jinwoo were to turn back time using God's artifact, the consciousness of the higher beings would still remain, and questioned if Jinwoo would still go through with it even though the deceased monarchs would return to life with their their memories from this timeline intact. Jinwoo affirmed once more and added that once they turned back time, he wanted them not to send anyone to Earth, explaining that he would take care of the monarchs and their armies by himself in the dimensional gap. Admiring Jinwoo's willingness to take on the entire war alone, the fragment of brilliant luminosity asked his reason for doing this, informing him that although they had used the cup of reincarnation many times, this was the best result they had ever achieved. Silently looking at his father's dagger, Jinwoo said that he had lost too many people in this battle, and he wanted to bring them back. The rulers warned him that the durability of the cup of reincarnation was nearly exhausted, and if Jinwoo were to fall this time, he would not be able to turn back time again. They noted that if Jinwoo stopped now, he could be remembered as the hero who stopped the monarch's invasion and be forever remembered by the people. However, no one would be able to remember the fight he was about to take on now. They informed Jinwoo that if he were to lose, the fragments would be waiting for him, and even if he were to win, no one would be there to congratulate him. And once again, the brightest fragment of luminosity asked Jinwoo if he still wished to turn back time. Jinwoo closed his eyes for a moment, his thoughts drifting to his mother and Gina, to Cha Hai-in, Chairman Woo Jin-chul, and Jin-ho. With their faces clear in his mind and his resolve firm, he responded that he would go back in time. This stunned the brightest fragment of luminosity, as he realized Jinwoo truly wanted to save not just a portion of the world, but the entire world with his own hands. He noted that Jinwoo's will to carry everything alone reminded him of Ashbourne, Jinwoo's predecessor. Understanding the weight of the decision, the brightest fragment of luminosity wished Jinwoo the best of luck. However, Jinwoo stopped him for a moment and asked what would happen to the shadow soldiers that did not exist in the past. The brightest fragment of luminosity explained that the beings which overlapped with the past would perish, while the beings that did not would remain. Jinwoo smirked, saying he understood, and informed the rulers that he was now ready. Summoning the cup of reincarnation, the brightest fragment of luminosity expressed hope that Jinwoo's courage would save his world. As the cup of reincarnation began to shine brightly, its radiant beams spread swiftly, covering the entire world. The light reached Jin-ho at his office, Jinwoo's mother and Gina as they gazed out the window, Woo Jin-chul, Liu Zhigang, Thomas Andre, Baek Yoon-ho, Choi Jong-in, and Cha Hai-in. The brilliance grew stronger and brighter until it enveloped the entire world.